I was reborn before marrying the prince consort. At that time, I had not yet been relentlessly forced by my former husband to the point of being killed by his sword. I was still the innocent girl waiting to be wed. I thought our feelings were mutual, that we would surely love each other without doubt. But after marriage, he and his lover hit me with a harsh reality. Never be apart until old age? Just child's play, and you believed it? Ding! RoyalStory reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Duan Ruashi, do you think you deserve it? The cold words came from Yi Lianchun's mouth. Why don't I deserve it? And you, a treacherous person, have the nerve to question my worth? The kanji I had been surviving on for days weakened me to the point I could barely speak. Yi Lianchun laughed lightly as if he were still that carefree, sunny youth from years ago, but the words he spoke were full of icy coldness. Treacherous person? What is faith? What is loyalty? Did you think about faith and loyalty when you forced a marriage upon me before His Majesty? His sword gleamed, and I was forced to retreat, trembling all over. Yi Lianchun, asked yourself, did I misinterpret? Or was it all your meticulous scheme? Upon hearing this, Yi Lianchun's face darkened instantly, his voice filled with suppressed anger. At the beginning, I only wanted to be friends out of kindness. How did you repay me? With unwarranted affections? No, it wasn't like that. Clearly, he had courted me so attentively before marriage. He said he loved me, only wished to marry me and stay together forever. I pleaded with my father to promote his position, gave him a chance to fulfill his ambitions, negotiated for him in court, and exhausted myself for him. But this is the outcome? Suddenly, the sound of footsteps came from outside, and a servant's voice was heard. Master, master, someone from the palace is here. I know. After saying that, he seemed to return to his usual gentle and considerate self, brushing the hair from my forehead back into place, holding my hand, and whispering in my ear. Your Highness, your hair is messy. Then he gave a cold smile, using the sword to measure my neck. After you die, I will marry Ruoyan, and we will forever cherish your memory. Frightened, I backed away and turned to scream for help, but no sound came out. In disbelief, I turned around. Swoosh! The sword cut across my throat, and I fell down in despair. In my ears lingered, I swear to be with your Highness, forever till old. Blood soaked through, dying with unfulfilled eyes. My soul floated away from my body. I looked at the woman lying in the pool of blood, her eyes still wide open. I drifted forward, trying to close her eyes, but couldn't touch them. Floating outside, Yi Lianchun instructed the guards at the door. Transport her to the main hall's coffin, and remember to look sorrowful, someone from the palace is coming. The guards, upon receiving the order, barged in and roughly hoisted me up. Suddenly, one of the guards seemed to think of something, placed me on the ground, and spoke to the other guard. Do you want to taste what a princess is like? The other guard was shocked. What? Do you dare? She has syphilis. That could kill us. Hey, syphilis, that's all nonsense from the masters above. Without saying that, how would we deal with the palace people coming down? I tried to push them away, but I couldn't even touch a hair on their heads. They closed my eyes and cursed, "Pa, still dare to stare, what bad luck." I kicked and punched wildly, but it was useless. With a gust of wind, I was like a kite dragged into the main hall. The little eunuch from the palace was staring blankly at the coffin. He had long heard about Princess Duan Ruashi's promiscuous behavior, but he hadn't expected her illness to kill her so quickly. Unable to control himself, he wanted to take a closer look when someone patted him on the back, startling the little eunuch to turn around. Yi Lianchun appeared to be overwhelmed with sorrow, even his tone was filled with grief. Why has the eunuch come? Here to see the princess? The little eunuch immediately bowed. I has just heard the bad news. Prince consort mustn't grieve too much and harm your health. The princess has passed, and surely, in heaven, she wouldn't want to see you hurt by sorrow. Yi Lianchun wiped tears with his sleeve as if his heart had been struck. What you said are right. What's the reason for your presence here? Hearing this, the little eunuch cried even harder than Yi Lianchun, almost unable to stand. His Majesty! The Emperor! has passed away. The two began to cry together, and after some time, the little eunuch finally spoke again. Now, our second prince has ascended the throne. At least this fulfills the emperor's heart, and both the emperor and princess can rest in peace. When I heard of my father's death, the tears of blood I shed had not yet faded. Then I heard about my second brother's ascension and nearly dissipated my soul. My second brother was unfilial. My father had said he wished he had never given birth to such a son. He even coveted my father's concubine and secretly engaged with her, producing a bastard. How could it be him who ascended the throne? After sending away the little eunuch, Yi Lianchen hurried to the west wing, without even changing his clothes. In the room, two naked figures were entwined, and I wanted to turn away but was pulled back, making even turning difficult. I had no choice but to watch them move, as Duan Ruoyan's face flushed, clinging tightly to Yi Lianchen. The two seemed to disregard everything else, moving passionately. Suddenly, Duan Ruoyan's voice sounded. Is she dead? Dead clean. Duan Ruoyan suddenly pushed him away, tears welling up in her eyes. Are you regretting it? Don't forget how she broke us apart. Yi Lianchen reached out to wipe away the non-existent tears from Duan Ruoyan's face. I remember, very clearly. He then kissed her cheek. You don't know, when she died, it disgusted me terribly. Suddenly, Duan Ruoyan seemed frightened and curled up in a ball. Do you think the emperor will investigate us? Ruoyan, you're overthinking. The old emperor is dead, the second prince has taken the throne. The second prince? He killed. Duan Ruoyan looked at Yi Lianchen in disbelief. Yi Lianchen grabbed her hands, lifted them above her head, and kissed her fiercely. Ruoyan, you're so clever. To tell you the truth, I played a part in helping the second prince ascend the throne. Blinded by hatred, I wanted to pounce on this couple and tear them apart. Suddenly, I felt an intense pain all over my body, as if my soul was being pulled away. I found myself inside a coffin, surrounded by darkness. I died disgracefully. The common people accused the princess of being promiscuous and contracting plum blossom disease. Yi Lianchen and Duan Ruoyan, with reddened eyes, cried and wailed in front of the coffin. One was my husband, the other my cousin, both earning a reputation for deep affection and loyalty. Yet, I felt the sound of their cries gradually fading away. Eventually, I could hear nothing at all. When I opened my eyes again, I heard my father's loving voice, my child? Which one do you want to choose as your consort? The palace held a flower-viewing banquet to publicly announce my chosen consort. I saw Yi Lianchen sitting among the guests, basking in everyone's praise. Indeed, the entire city knew that the princess favored the young General Yi. In my previous life, I frequently visited the general's mansion in secret. Everyone thought today's event was just a formality, as everyone knew who the future consort would be. My father looked at me with kind eyes and asked, my child, I have gathered the best young men from the entire city. Do you have a favorite? I scanned the room and asked in confusion, the entire city? Why don't I see Prime Minister Liu? The room suddenly fell silent. Your Highness. What do you mean by this? Yi Lianchen hurriedly stood up, glancing cautiously at his father, the old General Yi. Hearing this, I smiled. Did the young General Yi drink too much wine? I have no idea what you're rambling about. The Prime Minister was loyal and upright. Choosing him as my consort would please my father and ensure a lifetime of stability for me. He was the perfect choice. Your Highness, I am here, a cold voice came from behind. I calmly turned around. Liu YeJue. Living two lives, I had never realized that the cunning, ruthless Prime Minister in court could be so handsome. Yes, a beautiful man, with long eyelashes and a slightly visible tear mole beneath his left eyelid, looking both gentle and resilient. It truly was surprising. Perhaps my gaze was too naked and direct, for Liu YeJue gave a slight cough, pulling me back from my wandering thoughts. Father, I am fond of him. I said with a bright smile to my father sitting high above. My father immediately proclaimed loudly, I approve of this marriage. Following my father's hearty laughter, I excused myself and walked away with Liu YeJue. I looked at the aloof Liu YeJue. My father had already investigated whether he had any romantic interests. To his surprise, the Prime Minister was not interested in women, which scared my father into thinking he might have a preference for men. I planned to personally ask if he was willing to marry me. Just as I was about to speak, he gently said, "I am willing." He said this with a faint smile, even his eyes curved. I was stunned. How did the Prime Minister know what I wanted to ask? Liu YeJue smiled. I am quite handsome, have no family ties to worry about, and earn a decent salary. I would not cause you any concern. Suddenly, he leaned close to my ear. Since your highness has given me this chance, I will not let you go. Startled by his breath on my ear, and noticing the smell of alcohol, I asked, "Have you been drinking?" His smile was like a spring breeze. Just a little, to boost my courage. Please don't blame me, your highness. He seemed relieved and took out a prepared jade hairpin, gifting it to me before he left. Did he truly like me? I couldn't figure it out. Did he feel the same in our past life? Liu YeJue seemed different from the rumors. He was willing to marry me and seemed genuinely eager. This meant I no longer needed to worry. I did not notice Liu YeJue in the distance, with Shinjun draping an arm over his shoulders, laughing and teasing him. Well, you've got what you wanted, winning the beauty. Were you planning to snatch the consort position from YeJue today? Maybe, if my sincerity worked. The scorching July sun felt like it was burning people alive. The 5 southern countries waged war together, the Yi family led troops to a triumphant victory. Old General Yi, with a broken arm, knelt outside the main hall. Not seeking promotion or wealth but only begging the princess to marry into the Yi family, demonstrating the emperor's vast grace. Hearing Mingyue's indignant narration, my hand froze while trimming the flower branches. When soft tactics failed, they resorted to hard ones? In the last life, nothing like this had happened. That year, I moved out of the palace for the first time to live alone in the princess's residence. The surrounding people gathered curiously to watch. The carriage leaving the palace was surrounded by onlookers, and the guards dared not take action, only maintaining a defensive stance. Suddenly, the sound of hooves came, and the surrounding dust made the people retreat in fear. Your servant apologizes for being late, your highness, please forgive me. The young man, with jet black hair, dressed in red and holding a long sword, was extraordinarily handsome. He protected me into the residence just like that. I secretly lifted the curtain to take a look, and with just one glance, I couldn't look away. The 2 yards of the princess's residence and the general's residence were connected. He skipped class to go to the military camp but accidentally climbed into my yard. He widened his eyes in fear, and I couldn't help but cover my mouth and laugh as I looked at him with leaves on his head and 2 big tears in his pants. When he saw me laugh, he wasn't scared anymore. He said the princess was different from what he imagined. As the 2 of us looked at each other, the air seemed to fill with a sense of ambiguity. Our slightly red cheeks said it all, the brilliant sunshine, the frenzied heartbeat, like thunder in our ears. Later, my cousin, Duan Ruoyan, came to visit me. She wore the most fashionable embroidered dress and had a slightly yellowish-white jade pendant around her waist. The osmanthus fragrance hairpin on her head made her even more cute and charming. I brought her to the backyard to drink, not expecting Yi Lianchen to be there too. I joked that he escaped school and came here again without fear of the old general's punishment. Yi Lianchen was stunned at that moment, his eyes staring straight at the slightly yellowish jade pendant, ignoring the tea soaking his sleeve. Duan Ruoyan and I couldn't help but laugh. Yi Lianchen's face flushed slightly, and he immediately jumped from the chair, turned his head, embarrassed, his eyebrows showing distress, as if unable to express his emotions. At that time, I didn't notice the fleeting emotions in their eyes. The 3 of us ordered the best fruits to eat while drinking and agreed to have such fun next time. But I didn't expect the next time to be when the decree for the marriage came. The flower viewing banquet set up in the palace was always the most prestigious banquet in the capital. I playfully chatted with my sisters next to the empress. I saw Yi Lianchen waving at me and walked over to him amid everyone's teasing. I smiled and asked, "What's wrong, young General Yi?" He pursed his lips and said nothing, just looking at me intently. I couldn't stand his gaze, and finally, he spoke, "Was it you who asked for this?" I was puzzled and asked, "What?" His face darkened. You don't need to pretend you don't know anything. Don't worry, it will be as you wish. He turned and left after saying that, and I was still puzzled about what he meant. When I turned around, I saw Duan Ruoyan looking at me with tearful eyes, full of resentment, before turning away. 3 days later, the decree arrived. Yi Lianchen was conferred the title of Prince Consort. Instantly, the entire capital was abuzz with discussions about our marriage. I was so happy, holding the large red fabric and trying it on my body. Yi Lianchen came to see me once, but this time he didn't jump over the wall. He came in openly through the main door, and the moment he saw me, his face broke into a smile. I was still shy like a little girl, blushing as I looked at him. He smiled and patted my head, saying, "Why are you suddenly so shy now that you're getting married?" He waved the osmanthus cake he was holding in front of me. "If you don't eat it, it'll be cold soon, hurry up." We sat on the stone table in the backyard. Yi Lianchen kept talking as he unwrapped the cake, as if he wasn't the same person who had a dark look on his face that day. I still spoke up, if you are unwilling. I can tell my father, don't force yourself." Yi Lianchen's hand paused for a moment, a flicker of malice in his eyes, but he quickly returned to normal, looking at me firmly. "I only wish to marry your highness and spend our lives together till old ages." I was lost in my memories when suddenly I heard a commotion at the door. I looked up and saw Duan Ruoyan barging into the yard. "Why are you stopping me?" I never needed to announce when I came to see my sister. "Are you all blind?" I lifted the curtain and walked out. "What's all the noise?" Duan Ruoyan blushed under the maid's gazes, a hint of resentment flashing in her eyes, before spreading a smile and saying, "Sister, this maid is so rude. I came to see you, and she actually stopped me." I turned and walked into the house, speaking as I walked. "So, you're saying I didn't properly teach my maids?" Duan Ruoyan stopped in surprise. "Sister, what do you mean by that?" I never meant it that way. I picked up a piece of cake and put it in my mouth, pushing the plate towards her. "Try it quickly, the fruit from the southern country, you can't get it outside." Duan Ruoyan examined it but didn't put it in her mouth. "Speaking of the southern country, sister, what do you think about the Yi family's proposal?" I brushed off the crumbs. "Why not marry?" The Yi family is a pillar of the country, and it's rare to receive such a blessing. Duan Ruoyan twisted her handkerchief nervously before speaking. "Sister, aren't you fond of Liu YeJue? It's heartbreaking to see you compromising yourself, but I have a plan I'd like to offer." Before I could answer, Duan Ruoyan knelt down quickly. "Sister, the Yi family asked to marry a princess, but they didn't specify which one. I boldly offered to marry in your place." I stood up and helped her up, feigning gratitude. "But, little sister, the Yi family wants a princess. How can you, just a noble lady, stand in for me?" Duan Ruoyan struggled to hide her joy but couldn't stop smiling. "That's not hard, sister. Plead with the emperor, he dotes on you and would surely agree to confer me as a princess to marry into the Yi family in your place." Tearfully hugging her, I said, "Good sister, to have a sister like you is truly my blessing." Duan Ruoyan furrowed her brow, obviously not expecting me to act this way, and pushed me. "Sister, you're hurting me. Stop." Hearing the same voice as in my past life, I turned my head in anger, seeing Yi Lianchen looking heartbrokenly at Duan Ruoyan. "General Yi?" Duan Ruoyan's voice rang out. "What are you going to do to Ruoyan?" I looked at Yi Lianchen in full armor, draped in a red cloak, as spirited as ever, just like in my past life. I playfully observed the sticky, lingering look between the two of them. How did I not notice it in my past life? Ahem, do you need a bed prepared for you both? Isn't it inappropriate to be like this here? Duan Ruoshi. As a princess, how can you defame someone's reputation? Ruoyan and I are innocent, how dare you? Enough. You have a naive nature, I won't argue with you. We'll be getting married soon, so you should behave yourself. I raised an eyebrow, waiting to see what else he would say. Seeing Duan Ruoyan's teary eyes about to fall, I decided to lay it all out. What your Yi family wants, my father will not agree to. Don't even think about it. The Yi family's merits are not yours. Rewards will be given to the soldiers as per the roster. being immature in my childhood, might have led you to misunderstand something. Now it is clear, you and I are truly unmatched. Having said that, I turn my gaze to Duan Ruoyan. You should stop daydreaming about becoming a princess. Better think of how to fix your brain, you're very foolish. I only wish you both a happy and long-lasting marriage. You might as well hurry up and get locked together. I want to see how, without my support, you would surpass your half-brother, who has meritoriously performed in battles, to inherit the title. After saying this, I disregarded their looks and had the guards escort them out. I must say, Duan Ruoyan did wake me up. A princess can be appointed, but it won't be her. Unexpectedly, in the dungeon, I saw Liu YeJue again. A Liu YeJue I wasn't familiar with. I saw Liu YeJue spit out white wine onto a small knife and then, without expression, slice the tendons in a prisoner's hand, causing blood to splatter all over Liu YeJue's face. A guard handed over a towel, and as Liu YeJue lifted his head, he met my gaze. I saw visible panic in his eyes. He even forgot to wipe his face, reverting to that innocent look. I smiled and took the towel from the guard, gently wiping his face. While wiping, I asked, "What are you panicking about? You're merely interrogating a prisoner, not indiscriminately killing innocent people. Would I blame you for it? Your Highness is kind-hearted and pure. I just can't bear you being near such filth." The more he spoke, the dimmer the light in his eyes became, as if he was breaking down. I comforted him like I was coaxing a child. Don't be afraid. If soldiers didn't stain their hands with blood, how could they defend the homeland? Should we let villains roam free? The same goes for you. Hearing my words, he seemed to calm down somewhat, smiling as he took the towel to wipe his own face, asking, "Why has you come here?" "To redeem someone." I thought for a moment and added, "A woman." I patted his shoulder and followed the dungeon guide. After walking for a long time, I finally saw her in a dark cell. I looked at the girl who had been tortured for years. Years of malnutrition made her body as thin as paper. I took her out of the dungeon and settled her in the palace. The young girl timidly asked me whom she should serve. I looked at Duan Ruoyan with pity and comforted her, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you don't have to live in fear. I will support you in everything." In my past life, I did not know the twisted love story of Yi Lianchen and Duan Ruoyan. I had to thank Duan Ruoyan for ranting to me every day after I was confined, revealing their secrets like a flood. Is this why they say villains perish from talking too much? Duan Ruoyan laughed maniacally. Do you think he fell in love with me at first sight? It was all thanks to that identical jade pendant. Why did Duan Ruoyan get to save him before me? Did she think she could use the pendant as a proof of love? I refused to let her have her way. She and you, both of you robbed me. I sold her to a brothel, where she suffered unspeakable torture. Don't be so smug. You're going to die soon too. Everyone who steals from me deserves to die. They all deserve to die. My mother instructed my father to treat me well before she died, but he didn't. Duan Ruoyan was stillborn. Duan Ruoyan grabbed my face. Do you know what you stole from me? We were born on the same day, in the same month, of the same year. Mother said it was you. You stole all my attention. No one remembers Duan Ruoyan, they only remember the newly born Princess Duan Ruoshi in the palace. Why don't you just die? I looked at the trembling girl in the corner and hugged her with heartbreak. I needed to turn her into a sharp sword that would pierce their hearts. These days, I taught Duan Ruoyan to read, write, and follow etiquette every day. She had an incredible learning ability. After these days of study, she suddenly looked like a lady from a noble family. I once jokingly asked her if she wanted to gain freedom or seek revenge. She resolutely answered, "Your Highness, Ruoyan wants to make them pay 100-fold for what I have suffered." Seeing the jade pendant she presented, I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh internally. A savior? A bosom friend? Yi Lianchen mistook glass for jade. Duan Ruoyan tilted her head and asked, "Why is your Highness helping Ruoyan so much?" I smiled and touched her head, "Because you are the kindest girl in the world, worthy of the best." She shyly smiled. Since my mother died, no one has treated Ruohan so well. I frowned slightly. What about your father? Duan Ruohan seemed to recall something and lowered her eyes. Father likes the legitimate sister because she was born to his legal wife. No matter what she does, father doesn't care. Duan Ruohan rolled up her sleeves, revealing scars all over her arms. She smiled and said, "Thanks to these terrifying scars, I avoided many troublesome guests." She turned to look at me and saw that I was already in tears. She wiped my tears and said, "Sister, don't cry. Ruohan doesn't feel any pain at all." I angrily quoted, "A rat has teeth, but a person has no limits." A person without limits, why should they not be cut off? Your Highness? Liu YeJue had entered the pavilion at some point, and Mingyue looked at me with a troubled expression. Your Highness, I did announce his arrival, but you and Miss Duan were talking happily, so I guess you didn't hear. I waved my hand, indicating for Mingyue to take Duan Ruohan away first. Why does the Prime Minister have time to visit my place today? Liu YeJue sat down next to me and asked, "Does your Highness not want me to come?" How could that be? I'm just curious. A breeze blew past, carrying a faint scent of alcohol. I leaned on my shoulder to sniff the unexpected smell. Did the chef sneak a drink again? Liu YeJue was startled by my action and quickly came to support me. In an instant, I understood. You drank again? Do you enjoy drinking? Truly difficult to deal with. Honestly, I really dislike drunkards. The husband of my personal attendant, Nanny Chiao, is one. Every time he drinks, he hits and kicks Nanny Chiao. It's so terrifying. Only recently did I order them to separate and finally resolve the issue. Actually, I'm ill from drinking too much, but I heard alcohol can boost courage, so I only had a little. I smiled at his words and said, "Next time, don't torture yourself." Do I seem like I would eat you? In September, the Grand Tutor's legitimate daughter's flower viewing banquet specially invited me. At the banquet, I was arranged in the upper section, which was quiet with a curtain to shield me. Duan Ruoyan didn't know I was also there and was speaking ill of me with her friend without restraint. Duan Ruoyan leaned lazily on her seat, fanning herself, and disdainfully said, "You only don't know her like I do. She really doesn't deserve the title of princess." The noble ladies nearby agreed, "Isn't she going to marry the young General Yi?" Although His Majesty hasn't responded yet, everyone thinks it's a sure thing. Which young General Yi? I remember Ruoyan mentioned he's the one who climbs the wall to bring you brown sugar water during your period. Being flattered, Duan Ruoyan was delighted. Isn't it? No matter if she's a princess, she's demeaning herself. But I think the rumor is false. My emperor uncle intends to appoint me as a princess to marry the young General Yi. What? Does His Majesty also think that Princess Ruoshi isn't suitable for the great general who stabilizes the country? Ha ha ha. Duan Ruoyan and her friends laughed freely, as if I was dirt beneath their feet and they were goddesses. Suddenly, someone with sharp eyes noticed the maid Yuyan behind the curtain and discussed. I wonder which distinguished guest the Grand Tutor's daughter invited this time, to be so grand. Duan Ruoyan scrutinized, jealousy flashing in her eyes. Who is this? She's so ostentatious. As the drum started before the curtain, all eyes immediately focused here. The Grand Tutor's daughter approached with a smile and gracefully bowed. Greetings, Your Highness. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. The Grand Tutor's household is deeply honored. No need for formalities, rise. I spoke calmly from behind the curtain. The maid drew the curtain aside to permit a clear view of the performance. Duan Ruoyan and her companions were shocked to realize they sat very close to me, uncertain of how much I overheard. The noble ladies, reluctant to associate with those who offended the princess, moved away to distance themselves. Duan Ruoyan, red-faced and angry, stabbed at the pastries in front of her with a golden fork. As soon as the performance ended, I got down from the platform in front of everyone. They looked at me in fear, worried I might do something harmful. To their surprise, I covered my mouth with a handkerchief and laughed, sitting beside them. You have quite the information network. You even know about the princess appointment. Duan Ruoyan and her friends breathed a sigh of relief. Duan Ruoyan was particularly pleased, almost grinning from ear to ear. I continued, the decree to appoint Princess Duan Ruohan will soon be issued. I looked at Duan Ruoyan. You'll have to return early then. It will be a grand celebration for your family. Duan Ruoyan's smile froze, and her friends poked her. What does this mean? Do you have a sister named Ruohan? I glanced around indifferently and stood up. That's enough. I'm tired. Don't let me hear any more gossip, or you might lose your tongues. A circle of people, trembling with fear, turned on Duan Ruoyan angrily. It's all your fault. What if she takes these rumors seriously? You, a princess? Go back and see your so-called princess sister. How unlucky. We made the princess unhappy for nothing. Duan Ruoyan, seemingly deaf to their words, bit her lip hard, clenching and then loosening her fists. Liu YeJue and I were set to marry the next February. Fearing I might regret it, he obtained my father's permission and rushed to my palace every day after court. I prepared tea and snacks daily, as it wouldn't do to treat him poorly. On the first day, he was quite tense and drank another pot of white wine. I found it amusing and ordered Yuyan to bring some sobering soup to help clear his head. Soon after settling, Yuyan rushed in, saying, "Your Highness, quickly come." The Prime Minister, I was alarmed. After my rebirth, I had carefully chosen my attendants, ensuring no one was. Yuyan, seal the palace immediately. Not a whisper of this must leave. I hurried towards the room, my hands trembling even as I opened the door. Was I scared? I thought, even if I had been reborn, I could never tolerate betrayal. When I opened the door, I was at a loss for words. Liu YeJue lay crookedly on the bed, still trying to maintain his cool and reserved demeanor. Upon seeing me, he immediately showed a pitiful expression, like a little puppy. His eyes were watery, and his cheeks turned bright red. I walked forward, and he suddenly sat up and hugged my waist. I patted his head and smiled. Not behaving? Don't make things hard for yourself next time. In the next second, his arms tightened around me, and Liu YeJue collapsed onto the bed. I was startled and then fell with him. Looking at Liu YeJue with his eyes closed, he looked utterly drunk. I smiled helplessly and played with his eyebrows and eyes. For some reason, like a rogue, I brought my lips closer. When our lips met, I only had one sensation: softness. I closed my eyes, indulging in the magical feeling of my first kiss, completely unaware that Liu YeJue had opened his eyes and his earlobes had turned red. Ever since I secretly kissed Liu YeJue last time, he blushed every time he saw me. It must be my imagination. Besides, how could a shrewd prime minister behave like an innocent child? Guilt makes cowards of us all. My eldest sister, Duan Ruohan, hosted a banquet, saying that I was going to get married soon and that she must gather all the handsome men in the world for me. Otherwise, I would be too restricted after marriage. My eldest sister, Duan Ruohan, had worried our father since childhood. She resolutely refused to marry. Fortunately, our country's military strength was powerful enough to ensure she remained free to choose her marriage. However, this also made her wild and unrestrained, spending her days in brothels and wine houses, keeping handsome entertainers, and enjoying life. In my past life, Yi Lianchen, manipulated by Duan Ruoyan, sent Duan Ruolan, my close sister, to marry into a foreign land to satisfy the old emperor's perverse penchant for tormenting his bedmates. My once bright and sunny elder sister died miserably on the bed. Now, seeing her sitting next to me, smiling radiantly, I felt as if time had stood still. She arranged for Marquis Wang to speak with me, and for the courtesan of the capital to pour wine for me, ensuring everything was perfect. I asked curiously, "Didn't you just take in a new companion not long ago?" "Don't mention him. I always rely on their willingness and never use my power to force anyone. But he insists on staying and won't marry anyone but me. Rare to see you so defeated?" I teased. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Yi Lianchen again. He stood under the corridor with Duan Ruoyan, both in resplendent armor. In my previous life, I adored his heroic figure in fine clothes and on horseback. Now, he looked at Duan Ruoyan with such affection that it was almost overflowing. He was utterly smitten. Perhaps I was staring too obviously. He also noticed me and swiftly walked over with a fawning look on his face. I quickly retreated a few steps, only feeling safe when there was no contact between us. "General Yi, do you need something? How have you been lately?" he asked, rubbing the hem of his clothes awkwardly, though his pride made him lift his head. It is not proper for a mere subject to comment on the princess's affairs. Duan Ruoyan, like a changed person, held my hand and cooed, "Sister, we haven't seen each other in so long. I think we need to clear up some misunderstandings." I pulled my sleeve back and, pretending to be profound, said, "Oh? How do you want to talk?" Duan Ruoyan intimately pulled me, waving away the maids. Yu Yan looked at me worriedly. I winked at her to indicate it was okay, so she led the maids away. I looked at the tea she handed me, noticing the suspicious tea leaves floating on top. The same trick again? I didn't expose her ruse. I took a sip and held it in my mouth, obediently allowing her to lead me to a secluded house. Sure enough, as soon as we entered, she claimed her clothes were wet and that she needed to change. As soon as she left, an ugly, fat man, drooling, stepped out from the shadows. I raised my hand slightly, and just as the shadow guards made a move, the door was burst open. Someone shouted, "How dare you kidnap the princess? What are your intentions?" I was briefly stunned, then found myself enveloped in Liu YeJue's embrace. "Were you scared?" "Don't worry, I'm here." Liu YeJue's attendants, with knives in hand, escorted us out. Duan Ruoyan and the man she had found were taken to the center of the banquet. I crouched down and looked at the restrained Duan Ruoyan. "Trying to ruin my reputation so I can't get married? Are you still using such childish tricks?" I asked, exasperated. Duan Ruoyan couldn't utter a sound, her mouth tightly gagged by the guard, but she glared at me furiously. My eldest sister, Duan Ruolan, was flirting with her companion on her seat, not even bothering to look at the commotion, seemingly very engrossed. Facing the crowd, I feigned worry and said, "Oh dear, what should we do?" Ruoyan was caught alone with a stranger. What will happen to her reputation? My voice was loud enough for everyone around to hear, and I'm sure it would spread throughout the capital within a day. A noble lady alone with a beggar? Surely, this would be big news. Feigning deep thought, I loudly said, "In such a crisis, if someone could marry Ruoyan, it would be great." Yi Lianchen hurried forward, saying, "I'll marry her. I'll marry her." I feared he wouldn't take the bait, but now he did. I signaled Liu YeJue's guard to untie Duan Ruoyan and remove her gag. They clung to each other, weeping pitifully. What a picture of a perfect couple. I couldn't help but clap my hands. I was just about to leave. Duan Ruoyan quickly stepped forward and grabbed my wrist, angrily saying, "Why are you doing this? You caused Lianchen to be scolded by his father and made me the subject of gossip. Now, why are you trying to matchmake us? What are you doing?" Liu YeJue glared at Duan Ruoyan and pried her hand off my wrist. He looked at the red mark on my wrist in distress and murmured, "It's all red." Liu YeJue's tone turned cold, a side of him I had never seen before. "General Yi, control your people. If they dare to overstep their bounds again, according to the law, they should be punished by death." I glanced at Liu YeJue reassuringly. With him here, Yi Lianchen was obviously more cautious. I looked at Duan Ruoyan's jealous and crazed expression and softly said into her ear, "I remember your sister has a jade pendant too." She was stunned momentarily, then furiously said, "What do you want? Speak! What do you know?" "Nothing much, just wondering what General Yi would think if he knew that the person who saved his life as a child was Duan Ruohan." "You dare?" "Duan Ruoshi, even a rabbit will bite when cornered." I chuckled at her, jumping up and down, "You are no rabbit." After saying that, I walked away from them in disgust. Liu YeJue dismissed the guards and followed me away from the crowd. As we passed a corner, he embraced me against the wall. "Your Highness, do you dislike me?" I was puzzled. "Why do you say that?" His eyes showed a hint of hurt as he softly said, "The young Marquis Wang, the top courtesan of the capital, do you think I don't compare to them?" Seeing that I didn't respond, his eyelashes drooped slightly, thinking of what had just happened, his brows furrowing unconsciously. He was so adorable that I couldn't help myself. I planted a kiss on Liu YeJue's cheek. "Your Highness? You are so beautiful. I really like your shy look." Hearing my bold confession, Liu YeJue seemed to open a floodgate, and his gentle kisses turned into a passionate exchange between our lips and teeth. Liu YeJue's body carried a familiar scent of wine, broad and warm. As if wanting to dispel the previous unease, he bit my earlobe punitively, then returned to my lips. Breathing heavily due to his kisses, my mind became hazy. I reached out to push him away, but he grabbed my hand and pressed it against the wall by my ear. Finally, he let go, breathing heavily. Wasn't he supposed to be a shy bunny? How come he's so good at kissing? As a princess, I couldn't lose. I pulled my hand back. Ignoring his dazed expression after being kissed, I placed my hand on his chest, slowly moving downward, wrapping around his waist to his lower abdomen. Hearing him groan, I stopped appropriately when he lay down on the carpet. Looking at the blushing Liu YeJue, I couldn't help but smile victoriously. "Your Highness, you really are bold. I grew up reading picture books with my elder sister. I've seen all kinds of stories." I emphasized the latter part. Seeing Liu YeJue's shy expression, I couldn't help but giggle, not noticing the smile forming on his lips. The Lady Chui's banquet was always a gathering place for aristocrats and nobility. I knew this time the banquet would attract all the elites of the city. They were definitely going, an excellent opportunity to introduce Duan Ruohan to the world. I took the well-prepared Duan Ruohan to the banquet. Listening to the information gathered by the spies, I excused myself after meeting the Lady Chui and walked around with Duan Ruohan. Dismissing the maids, I hid in a corridor gap. As expected, Yi Lianchen was feeding fish with his servant in the garden. Duan Ruohan smiled and approached, saying, "Sir? Can you tell me where the main hall of the banquet is?" Her gentle voice successfully made Yi Lianchen look up, and Duan Ruohan continued, "Could you take me there? I just returned to the capital and am not familiar with this place." Yi Lianchen hesitated, glancing around uneasily, but when he saw the jade pendant hanging from Duan Ruohan, his pupils contracted. Yi Lianchen was stunned for a moment, then excitedly asked, "This jade pendant, how come? Miss, could you give this pendant to me? I am willing to exchange 100 taels of gold for it." Duan Ruohan pretended to be frightened, quickly saying, "Absolutely not. This pendant was given to me by a brother I saved in childhood. It has great significance and cannot be given away. If you don't intend to help, why bother asking?" Yi Lianchen was shocked. "Brother? May I ask his name? I might know something." Duan Ruohan said loudly, "The son of General Yi, Yi Lianchen." "Sir, do you know? I came to the capital to find him." Yi Lianchen looked up at the sky with a bitter smile. "Yi Lianchen? That's me. Your Highness, it is said that recently, General Yi is getting very close with the newly appointed Princess Duan Ruohan." Yu Yan, while speaking, observed my expression, and only after confirming did she relax. "Very close, huh? That's just right." I lay on a rocking chair, joking with Yu Yan, when a spy hurried over. "Your Highness, the eagle has taken flight." The show was about to begin. Not wasting a moment, I walked out of the palace. If I delayed, I would miss it. As expected, the sound of a teacup shattering in the tea house pierced through the entire building. "Slut! It's one thing for you to come back, but now you set your sights on my man?" I frowned at the cup Duan Ruoyan threw. "Tsk, such a waste of fine Bailuo Chen tea." I squeezed into the private room and sat down to watch the drama unfold. The weak main female lead, the villainous supporting female lead, all that was missing was the male lead. "Duan Ruoyan, what are you doing?" "Ha, the male lead has arrived too." I was munching on sunflower seeds while watching the drama unfold. I saw Duan Ruoyan crying her eyes out, clutching Yi Lianchen's sleeve. Yi Lianchen pulled his sleeve back and shouted at Duan Ruoyan, "Our Yi family is here to marry the princess. What do you think you are? How dare you?" Duan Ruoyan cried even more, calling Yi Lianchen a heartless man. Yi Lianchen drew his sword and pointed it at Duan Ruoyan, saying to Duan Ruohan, Ruohan, if you want this woman who has tormented you for so many years to die, just say it, and I will make it happen. As he spoke, the sword pressed against Duan Ruoyan's skin, drawing a thin line of blood. Duan Ruoyan stood there in shock, her tears smudging her makeup, making her look ridiculous. Lianchen. The glint of the sword blinded me, and inexplicably, tears rolled down my cheeks. I couldn't explain the feelings inside. The second male lead was about to enter. Yi Zongbai appeared in blood-stained armor, followed by a large number of soldiers. He spotted me immediately and cupped his hands in a salute, Your Highness. I nodded in acknowledgement. Yi Lianchen, looking at him, stiffened his neck and said, Why are you here, brother? To fetch my new wife. Yi Zongbai gently drew Duan Ruohan into his arms and added, Ruohan is shy, so I specifically asked for the emperor's decree for the marriage and decided against a wedding banquet. I looked at the young couple with satisfaction. Duan Ruohan had told me before that she had a beloved, her only savior from the brothel. That day, Yi Zongbai raided the brothel to catch deserters. They fell in love at first sight, and he ransomed her. But fate had other plans. On the night he paid the ransom, the enemy caused chaos, and they were separated. I mediated for them, not letting their efforts go to waste. New wife. She came to the capital to find me. How is she now related to you, brother? Seeing Yi Lianchen's nearly insane reaction, Duan Ruohan knew that her act had worked. Yi Zongbai raised an eyebrow. Our Yi family sought the princess's hand, but we never said for whom. Father intended this for me. Brother, don't misunderstand. She controlled her tears. Yi Lianchen, perhaps we're fated to be apart. Seeing you and your elder sister happy is my blessing. How could I act against her by stealing her man? Seeing Yi Lianchen reach out in pain, Duan Ruohan quickly retreated and said, Let's part ways from now on. If you ever act out of line again, I fear it would only lead to my death. After finishing her lines, Duan Ruohan fainted into Yi Zongbai's arms as planned and was carried away. I watched Yi Lianchen and Duan Ruoyan stare daggers at each other, no longer the loving couple they once were. I stood before them and signaled for the inner servant to read the imperial decree. The inner servant unrolled the decree and read aloud. By the emperor's decree, Duan Ruoyan, daughter of Prince Qi, and Yi Lianchen, son of General Yi, are blessed by heaven and matched by destiny. Let this decree marry them, wishing them to be of one heart and mind and a happy union for 100 years. Today is my wedding day with Liu YeJue. A 10-mile procession of red decorations and bridal carriages extended from the palace to the end of the street. Red ribbons decorated every tree, and soldiers threw wedding candies to children watching the festivities. The city was bustling with curious onlookers. Duan Ruolan and Duan Ruohan sat beside me, chatting and keeping me company. My elder sister frowned, saying Yi Lianchen and Duan Ruoyan were always at odds after marrying. Yet they pretended to be a loving couple in public, making them the laughingstock of the entire capital. It's disgusting. Duan Ruohan added that Yi Lianchen found over a dozen concubines who resembled her. Now, people gossiped that he was infatuated with his sister-in-law, a deviation from ethics. He was even impeached for it today. I thought these news would bring me satisfaction, but to my surprise, I found them amusing and irrelevant. Finally, after completing the tedious rituals, it was late evening and I was waiting for Liu YeJue in the bridal chamber. Your Highness. Yu Yan woke me up, her face flushed. This is from Nanny Qiao. She said you must study it. I glanced at the object she hid behind her back. Seriously, why hide an erotic picture book? I told her to bring it out openly so we could look at it together. I was taken aback. Nanny, where did you get this? Both Yu Yan's face and mine turned red at the sight. Haven't we seen this before? Why did Nanny bring it again? Your Highness, this book should be spread on the bed for you and the prince consort to look at tonight. What? I was shocked but quickly calmed. It's just a picture book. No big deal. I reassured Yu Yan, it's okay. As long as the prince consort is more embarrassed than I am. I figured Liu YeJue would be drunk when he came back since he can't handle alcohol well. Sure enough, Liu YeJue stumbled in, supported by a servant. I rushed to help, but he glanced at me with a mischievous smile and said, "Honey, how was my performance?" I was stunned. The smell of alcohol was strong, but I still agreed, quite good. After we dismissed the maidservants, he walked into the bridal chamber. Suddenly, I remembered the erotic picture book was still laid out in plain sight. I was still a step behind. I watched as Liu YeJue stopped in front of the table, his earlobes flushed red while toying with the wine cup. "Honey, shall we drink this nuptial cup together?" To prevent him from saying anything further, I quickly grabbed the wine cup and downed it in one gulp, then forcefully fed him the rest of his cup. My wife truly has a good tolerance for alcohol. Let's get down to business now. His eyes seemed to gleam, and he picked me up horizontally. When we reached the bed, his earlobes flushed again, and he mumbled something I couldn't hear clearly. I asked, "What did you say?" I said, "It's too big." The erotic paintings are hard to miss. Then, he pushed me onto the bed. Based on his earlier behavior, I initially planned to take the lead. Who would have known? Hidden depths, Prime Minister. Mutual admiration. In the pitch darkness of the room, warm fingertips ignited sparks, clothes fell away, and the thin calluses on his fingers lightly grazed the skin on my chest. A transparent doo-doo? Hearing the man's usually clear and cold voice turn husky, I shrank my shoulders and retorted, "Nonsense." He chuckled softly and let his hair down. My chin was brushed by his hair, and in a certain moment, along with his low and muffled voice, the end notes trembled uncontrollably. "You are mine." The next morning, I watched Liu YeJue's profile as he lay there, while I touched his abs and glared at him slightly. "You liar, you can drink perfectly well. Why pretend to get drunk from one cup? So you knew that I stole a kiss from you. You have deceived me too. We are even. When did I deceive you?" Even I didn't know I had deceived Liu YeJue. I've always been sincere and straightforward. Tongyang Town, the princess, the beggar, the buns, the silver coins. You said you would remember me. You were the little beggar? The one living in the dilapidated temple? I realized, I finally understood. The reason why Liu YeJue was so deeply affectionate towards me was because of the seeds I had planted over 10 years ago. I couldn't help but feel moved to the point of tears. To avoid letting him see my emotions, I sat in his arms, leaned on his shoulder, ensuring he couldn't see my face, and grumbled while acting petty. "No, you still lied to me. You were obviously experienced last night, pretending to be an innocent boy before the wedding." He covered me with the blanket to stop my fussing, held me down, and gently coaxed. "Baby, it's my fault. Please don't move anymore. Otherwise, your father will blame me for keeping you in bed." My face instantly flushed as red as a monkey's bottom. I used the blanket to barely cover myself and muttered, "I want to punish you. I willingly accept any punishment from you." Liu YeJue wrapped me in the blanket. "Then I punish you to love me for a lifetime." "As you command, Your Highness."